This is a panel. This is a panel that I've inked on regular printer paper. Look how paper thin this is. It's just regular printer paper. It's something that you can do too. Stay tuned. Welcome to this episode of the Walden Wong Art, and today I'm going to be doing an art review and also me inking this panel right over here. Before I start this video, I want to give a great congratulations to the graduating class of 2020. 2020 has been quite a year so far. We had a pandemic, we had killer bees, and now we have this protest going on. A lot of things that would make any kid, out of focus, but all of you were able to stay focused and graduate. So congratulations to you all. Being a father and watching my daughter graduate this year was something quite different. They didn't have the graduation ceremony where they walked through. Everything was done on Zoom and we just did it online. There was no school trips, no school dances. Even the yearbook they got was mailed to them, so they didn't get a chance to meet their friends and have them sign the yearbook and personalize it. So all of that was different. But all of you were able to graduate, and through all the hardships, you were able to do it. So congratulations to all the 2020 graduates. For those of you who landed on this channel, you don't know who I am. My name is Walden Wong, and I've been a comic book artist for Marvel Comics and DC Comics for a very long time. You can check out some of my work here, waldenwongart.com. There's a gallery and a lot of links that you can look at when you're on my website. And I also have a Patreon page. So for those of you who enjoy watching these videos that I make for you, please think about supporting me over on my Patreon. And on my Patreon, I also have mentorships where people can sign up. They can show me some of the work, and then I would critique the work. And I also have assignments where I give to Patreons, and then they would ink the work, pencil the work, letter or color, and then when they're done, they'll send it back to me and I'll critique them and have a one-on-one conversation with them. So think about joining my mentorships there if you're an aspiring artist. Now this is where this video comes in. So one of my patrons, he sent me his work. Let me show you his work right over here. Okay, after he sent me the work, I thought, maybe I should ink that same piece, and this is where this video comes from. This is the piece that I've inked, and then with this piece, we can do some comparisons of how I critique his work and how I approach working on it. So without further ado, let's head on over to the video. So here's the piece, and the first thing I'll do is I'll use a Statler Pigment Liner, 0.2. I'll ink the eyes first. And when I'm inking the eyes, usually I'll take my time, making sure that I do everything correctly and precisely as I can. I'll be true to the penciler's vision. And before we head on over to the rest of the video, the penciler is Robson Roca. He's a very good artist. So if you get a chance, look him up on social media. He's a very good artist. So right here, I'm making the sheen of the eye, the iris, the pupil. And usually when I'm making the eye, I'll make the top eyelid, make that a little bit thicker. Right here, I'm doing the eyebrows first. So when I'm making the eyebrow, usually I'll add a few lines like here, a few lines, and then I'll go back and I'll fill it all in. And then after looking at it, I wanted to go back and make the eyelid, the top eyelid, a little bit thicker. Usually there's a shadow that's cast underneath the eyelid, so the top eyelid is usually thicker. And here I'm making the nose, the nostrils, followed by the side of the nose. And then I will ink the lips. The lips, I will ink the bottom of the lines. I don't worry about the black areas there first. I would just ink all the lines, the necessary lines first. And then after the lines, I will continue inking the top of the lips and then the bottom of the lips. I don't worry about the shading yet. I just get all the forms ready first. Once the form is ready, then I'll go back and I'll fill in the dark ink areas. And then right here, I'll turn the paper. Now in this video, you'll see me pivoting the paper every so often. When I'm working, I'm constantly pivoting the paper. Just like if I'm doing clay, like I'm constantly turning the wheel. My hand draws better using this angle, and it works like a compass. So if I'm turning the paper, my hand is going this way. So that way you have a better arc. Now right here I'm using the quill, and I would feed the quill. And then here, I'm going to ink the eyebrows. So just like I use the Microns, I could also use a Quill to ink the eyes. It doesn't really matter what tools you use. Once you become a good inker and you understand your tools, any tools that you use can ink the same line. It's just that certain tools can create a better effect and a more efficient effect. So the left eye, I use a Micron, and the right eye, I'm using a Quill. I can just as well use a brush as well, but you know, whatever works best, and that's the easiest. For me, a Micron and a Quill, they're really sharp, so I can get those really fine lines. And then again, the top of the eyelid, always darker. Here I'm making the ears. So as I'm making the ear, notice that I'm using this quill as if I'm using a brush. In my head, a quill works just like a brush. You can control the width of the line as well as how narrow the line is. When I'm working, I will use the quill as well as the brush the same. You can control the pressure of your quill, you can control the pressure of the brush, and you can control how thick you want the line to be and how thin you want the line to be. So I'm inking the jaw here, and after that I will ink the inside shadow. Now you'll notice that I'm leaving a white line there. If I don't add that white line, that whole area, that black will mesh into the hair background. That's why I'm leaving a little white line from the chin to the back of the hair. And this is the ink I use for my brushes, Speedball. And then when I'm dipping my brush, usually I just dip it halfway. I don't dip the whole brush in there. Dipping half of your brush will absorb the ink into the brush. And usually when I'm inking hair, I would like to use the brush. A brush gives a very fine, soft line. And I can go really thin with this brush. This brush I'm using is a Pentel gouache brush. I'll add links below this video, so if you want to order some for yourself, there's links below. And here I'm tapering some of the lines. I'll start thin and I'll press into it as it gets thicker. Yeah, when you're inking, try to think about the tools that you're using. The more you practice with the tools, the better you'll understand it. The more you understand it, the more you'll know which tool works best for which lines. Again, all tools can create the same lines. Certain tools are more efficient in creating one line over the other. More efficient and more effective. So here I'm inking on a regular 8.5 by 11 printer paper. Usually comic book artists, they'll ink on Bristol board. You can use Bristol board or you can use printer paper. I'm inking here with the printer paper just to show that I can ink a very fine line. When you're using a brush, if you have too much ink inside the brush and you're inking on printer paper, that whole paper will bleed. So knowing how much ink is in your brush is very important. That's why you're only dipping halfway into the bottle of ink. Right here I'm patching the lines in, and I want to make sure it flows nicely from one area to another. You don't want those lines to crisscross. Now in the pencils, it's just all a black area, but as I'm making, I'm adding more hairlines. There's nothing wrong with adding more hair. So one of my patrons who sent me this image, let me show you his work on the left side of your screen. So compare his work with my work. Notice how my lines are thinner as the hair comes along. And I will add thicker lines on the eyes just to give it a shadow over there. Okay. Tapering lines is one of the hardest things to do. Once you master it, it becomes easier. I usually like going from thin to thick. I can also go thick to thin, but there's more control going thin to thick. You can use a brush, you can use a quill, you can use microns. Using a micron just takes a little bit more work. You have to go back and build upon the line. Again, I'm dipping the brush. Notice I'm only dipping halfway. Right here, there's black areas, but notice as I'm inking, I'm adding extra hairlines just because it's fun. If it doesn't turn out, you can always fill it in black, but if it looks good, just leave those white lines. And then I'm turning it upside down just because my hand arcs better that way. Okay, you see how that's pivoting very smoothly, very softly, consistently? And I'm controlling how thin I want the line to be, and I'm controlling how thick I want the line to be. Okay, I'm just going to add more lines, turn the page around and add more lines. Okay, that black area, I'm just going to add more hairlines. Just because it looks cool. And if it doesn't work out, you can always go back and then fill it in with the ink. Now I'm doing line weights. I'll start thin, I'll go thicker, and every time there's a bump, I would accentuate the line and go thicker and then thinner. The more you bounce your line weights, the better your image will look. Okay, I'm tapering the lines in. As I'm tapering, I'm going to go and fill in the rest of the black areas. More tapering lines, space them evenly, make sure they start around the same area and end in the same area. A pattern is what you want. So you may ask, how do I know how many hairs to add? This is where you as an artist comes in. Being an inker doesn't mean just tracing. It also means that you're an artist yourself. You can go in there and add more details into your work. So here, be very smooth, be very consistent. You don't want any of the lines to be jagged. You want them to be nice and curvy. You want lines to be fluid. Okay, more of the top of the hair. Again, one stroke at a time. I don't even think about filling in the ink areas. Here I am dipping the ink again halfway, and then after dipping it, I'll just ink in those lines. Some inkers, they will just go in and fill it out in black. I rather just hatch all those lines in, and then when they close up, that's okay too, because originally it was a black. And I'm going to continue doing the rest of the hair. Now the head, the hair, the face, mouth, nose, those are the most important parts of the image. A lot of times people are looking at your comic books. That's the first thing they look at is the faces first. So make sure those are as precise and accurate as you can be. So I spend more time on inking faces. So my original Patreon, let me show you his art on this part of the hair, right over here on the bottom left of your screen. And then you can compare it with mine's. Inking for me is very therapeutic. I can spend all day inking. Actually, in fact, I do spend all day inking. I just sit at a table and it's very therapeutic. And then by the time I'm done, it's already nighttime. Okay, now I'm making the bottom of the arm. And when I'm making the bottom of the arm, I'll make that thicker. And then here's the strap. I'll break up those lines. Why am I breaking up those lines? When I'm breaking up that line, the viewer, their minds will automatically connect the lines. But when you break it up, it gives more line variance. Right here, I'm tapering the lines and I'm going back and I'm closing them up. When I'm closing them up, those little triangle tips that goes into black, they also form a tip. So not only do you have a black tip on the outside, but your white tip is going into it. Then, and as I'm going in, I'm pressing down on it. Okay, now I'm making the back part and I'm bouncing the line weights around. Each time there's a fold, I'm giving a thicker and a thinner area. And then here's the Cyclops strap. I'm just going to ink the whole side of it. And at the same time, I'm thinking about how thin I want the lines to be and how thick I want the lines to be. Again, this Pentel Aguache watercolor brush, you can get a very hairline thin brush. Thinner than a Winsor Newton, thinner than a Raphael. Depends on how lightly you glide the brush on the paper. Some of you may ask, there's a few Aguache brushes out there. They have a size small, medium, and large. Which one do I get? I usually buy the small size. The reason I buy the small size is because with the small size, if I want a thicker line, I could just draw 2 lines and I'll fill it in. If I'm using a thicker brush, usually you can't go thinner, and that line with a thick brush is as thin as you can. So that's why I only pick up the thin brush. Okay, right here I'm making Cyclops arms. I'm doing all the black areas first, filling that in, and then right now I'm tapering more lines in. All the bold lines, I'll just press down. I'll use the side of the brush to get it really thick. Did you see how thick I can fill in the blacks? The black ink areas? I just press down hard with the brush and it just fills it in. Yeah, I'll flick it. Notice that I'm doing a lot of flick motions. The reason I'm doing a lot of flick motions is because when I'm flicking, that gives me a much smoother, finer line, softer line. When you're going slowly, your lines will become jagged. If you're flicking it and you're flowing it, you're gonna get a smooth line. Here, I'm pressing down really quickly into the taper lines. Notice when I'm ending the line, notice how fast I'm moving my hands. So I'll start slow and I'll move fast as I'm pushing into it. When I'm pushing into it, I'm concentrating on where I want those tips to close. I'll start thin, start slowly. Now, when I'm starting slowly, I'm concentrating on the spacing in between. And then when I'm pressing in, I'm concentrating on where I want the line to close up in the tip. Okay, right here, you notice that I can move my brush left, right, front, back. Just learn how to control your brush and you'll be very good at it. Okay, so I'll start thin, I'll press down, I'll get thicker. And then as I get towards the dark area, I'll just fill it in. Okay, press in lightly, press hard, lightly, press harder, and then lightly. Just control that brush. Know your tools. The more you know your tools, the more efficient you'll be with your work. Okay, right here, these are hatch lines. I'm spacing it evenly, and then I'm making sure it starts in the right area and it ends in the right area, like in the correct area. Here I'm tapering the lines. These days, you'll see a lot of artists who has a hard time tapering lines. They're just hatching the lines, and then they're adding like a double line to make it look like it fades. This does take a little bit of practice, and then once you get it, it's kind of fun. It's one of my favorite things to do, tapering lines. Starting thin, and it gets thicker as it goes into the ink areas. Pen actually holds a lot of ink. You can fill this pen with ink in the barrel, but I don't. I usually dip it because I like to control how much ink is in there. Okay, right now we do taper lines. Okay, concentrate on where it starts, concentrate on where it ends, concentrate on how you want that white tip to show up. Okay, more hair. Start very lightly and then whip it in. Start slowly, whip it quickly. Now this is under Cyclops' arm. Right over here, I'll focus on the spacing. How far apart. You want those spacing to be fairly close to each other and spaced evenly. As I'm going out into the white area, I get thinner on the lines. Okay. Now I'll come back and I'll cross taper. I'll cross taper, and then you want to cross taper evenly. So those diamond shapes that you created in between, they're always equal. Okay, start more tapering. I'll start thin, and I'll press darker as I go into that little small area, and I'll come back and I'll finish it. And this is me filling in the rest of the black areas. And this is a pretty quick part. Just going in there, quickly filling in all the ink areas. And this was filmed in real time, no sped up video or no slowing down, just so you can see the process of me inking this piece. One step at a time. So after I'm done, I'll look at it, and then some areas I will want to beef up some of the lines. I'll go back and I'll just make it a little bit thicker. Right here, there was a mistake also. I'm using white ink to create that spacing. And then I'm filling the blacks. And then usually once I'm done, when I'm done with work, usually I'll go back and I'll dip my brush again and then add another layer of ink on top, just to give it a nice dark feel of the inks. Because sometimes your first run, your inks are kind of grayish. So I'll go back very quickly and then just add a few more ink directly on top. It doesn't have to be precisely exactly to the side of the lines. I'll just add a whole bunch of ink and then let it dry a little bit, just to make the overall ink areas more darker. it's an extra step, but your final artwork will just look so much nicer. And then here I'm pulling out my Quill, and I'm making the optic blast, the telekinetic blast from Cyclock. And then I'm dipping my Quill. Notice I like feeding it with my dropper. I know exactly how much ink is in the dropper, and it keeps the top part of the Quill clean. Some artists will dip their whole Quill inside the bottle of ink, and then they have the ink on the bottom of the Quill as well as the top of the Quill. You see the top of the Quill right now is clean and there's no ink there. When it's clean, the ink just flows longer. When you have ink on top, the top part of the ink will always dry because that top part, ink is not flowing. So when I'm feeding the bottom of the Quill, I can be inking for a whole good hour, 2 hour, and then the whole Quill still clean. There's no gunk or dry because the bottom of the ink it's just flowing. And just quickly flip an ink and then break up some of the lines, and then quickly glide your hand. Yeah. And then the other side, I just quickly flick, a lot of flicking and then whooshing, breaking up some of the lines. Again, the viewer who sees this, their mind will automatically see the lines connected. So when I'm done, I will go back and look at the figure and find out where I can add some double lines just to give it more form. Okay, so these lines weren't in the pencils originally. I'm just adding stuff to make it look more, give it more depth in work. And then here's the final ink piece of Cyclock from the X-Men. And finally, I'll just take my ruler. I'll use the color repeatograph, the green one, what I'm using, and then I'll use a beveled ruler to ink the panel borders. When I'm making the panel borders, usually I'll just ink the outsides because who knows if the inks are still wet on the figure. So I make sure that my ruler doesn't touch any of the ink artwork area. I'll just hold my pen directly 90 degrees up, straight up, and then I'll ink it. So I just use a metal bevel ruler. And then for this side, I just use my acrylic ruler with a penny. I prefer using the acrylic ruler because I can see what's underneath it compared to the metal ruler. The reason I use a metal ruler is because that ruler is longer. I stick pennies underneath so it gives it a beveled edge. These acrylic rulers just flat. If I'm inking a line and then I'm removing the ruler, that'll make the ink bleed. But with the pennies, it just raises it up. And then that's the rest of the panels right here. So that's me inking this piece right over here. So I hope you enjoyed this video and that you all learned something from this. And if you're an aspiring comic book artist, think about heading over to my Patreon page and look at the mentorship programs that I offer. And if you just enjoy these videos that I make for you and you want to show some support, head on over to my Patreon. My Patreon is patreon.com/WaldenWongArt. There's different tiers that you can show support as well as mentorship programs that you can sign up for. And if you want to learn more about me, my website is waldenwongart.com. On my website, there's news, events, videos, lots of things that you can look at, lots of fun stuff, even a shop that you can order prints from. So thank you for that. Now, I want to thank all my patrons who supported me in the past, and I want to give a shout out to all my current patrons as of me making this video. So thank you all for being my patrons. So we have Alex, Art of Eden, Author, Dan, Daniel, Dee, James, Jennifer, John, Keith, Kit, Lewis, Milton, Shane, Sean, and Wes. Thank you all from the bottom of my heart for being my Patreon. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, share, subscribe if you haven't done so already. Hit that notification bell so anytime I upload a video, you'll be one of the first to see my videos. And again, congratulations to all of the class of 2020. Take care, you're our future. Have a good time. Bye-bye.